All right, Avs Nation, welcome to another episode of Locked On Avalanche. On today's episode, we will get to a question that's been rattling around in my brain for the last 48 hours or so, and it involves Cale Makar and the Norris Trophy. Not for this year, for next year, and I'll explain that. We will get to, they're releasing a day at a time awards for, like, the finalists, for the nominees for awards. Are we setting up for another snuff of Jared Bednar and Joe Sakic? Should we be prepared for that? And because we've had all this time off because of the Avalanche sweep, are we catching up on any shows? And in particular, because I just finished one show in particular that's completely done, and the ending was so-so. So what are the best endings to television shows that we've ever seen? We'll get to that, and then some. Let's get to it.
You're Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Avalanche fans, welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Always appreciated. Follow the show on social media outlets, LOPN_Avalanche on Twitter, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram. Questions, comments, concerns, opinions to lockedonavalanche@gmail.com. And follow the show on our YouTube channel over on YouTube. Hit subscribe and get notified when a new show goes live. We are recording this. It's I think the Wild and Blues are underway, about halfway through the first, no score yet. So we will monitor that as we are recording. Clearly, when you listen to this in the morning on Friday, you will have known if the Avalanche know their second round matchup or if it's going to have to wait another day. So we'll keep an eye on that as we go through this episode. But what I wanted to get to first, Mr. Sullivan, are you good audio-wise? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I've been thinking about the awards, because awards are coming out, nominees are coming out for individual awards. We got the Hart finalists, and we got the Norris finalists, and it's not a surprise that of who they are with Hedman, Makar, and Josi. I kind of just feel, just reading the room, I guess, if you want to use the phrase, I just feel like Cale Makar is going to get shafted here for this year. Unfairly so. I think people and voters are just fixed on Josi's points and nothing else, and are just so enamored with how many points he scored. I think if he has scored over 100, I think this would be not even a question. But I'm still holding out hope because he didn't reach that century mark, even though he got 96, which is impressive. I just feel like like I said, reading the room, I just kind of feel like Cale Makar is going to get the shaft for this, and I just don't feel like that's right. Having said that, and the votes are in, like it's done. You can't vote after the playoffs start. You can't vote based on what happens in the playoffs. But people remember what happened in the playoffs. And do you think, in kind of a way, that Cale Makar is winning the Norris Trophy already for next year based on this year being so tight, and the conversation is those two guys, and those people who voted went the way of Josi, and they see what happened in the playoffs and these guys played against each other. That's the best part about it. Is it was so one-sided that voters next year, and even if that happens, like, Makar's got to perform. I'm not saying he can just roll over and they'll just give him the award next year. But if he does something similar to what he's done this year, or even a little bit better, do you think voters will even say, like, I'm not saying I got it wrong last year, but this guy is way better than I thought he was? And I guess he's kind of setting himself up for next year's Norris in this year's playoffs. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, especially I think the awards are announced game 3 in that break.
Something like that. Yeah, it's around that time.
And let's
just
it is
anyway.
I mean, come on. We're all Avalanche fans here. Let's be honest. When Colorado's there in game 3 and Cale Makar, he continues doing what he's doing in these playoffs, and they announce the winner of the Norris is Roman Josi, who's sitting at home, who's probably on his 18th hole when they announce it.
18th round of golf, I would say.
But yeah, he's been doing everything.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to turn around and look at the hockey writers who voted on this and say, how does this make sense? Do you not see what Cale Makar is doing right now in the playoffs? Like, that's great that he did all this and Josi did that in the regular season. But clearly the eye test is Cale Makar is better all around at the game of hockey. And I feel like the voters will hear that and they'll be like, you know what? We're not making the same mistake next year. We're really going to evaluate this a little bit differently and not just go off the Google overall skill and like who's got the most points and that's my check mark. Like, I think the writers are going to take this in account too with the backlash off the Josi vote.
I mean, you can never expect what's going to happen in the postseason, and you don't vote off of that. I'm not saying that the writers would do that for next year, but I think just because it's been the Cale Makar show, and I didn't even want to say it's his coming out party because for, like you said, us Avalanche fans, like we've seen this, and now it's on a bigger scale of what he's doing. So I just feel like it's going to linger around heading into next year. Like, not that they're going to base next year's votes on what happened in this year's playoffs. They're not going to base it solely on that. I'm not that naive to think that way. I'm just saying the way that he performed in just one round so far maybe turned the thinking of voters for the future is kind of where I'm going with this. And I don't know. And you have another, hopefully 3 more rounds for this guy to play in the playoffs to show what he can do. And if that happens, if he has a repeat of what he did in round 1 and does it again, or maybe even better in round 2, the conference finals, and hopefully the Stanley Cup finals, I think it's just setting the base for next season. There's always people that just come out and have these great post seasons. And then people get contracts based on what they do in the postseason when they're a free agent. But Cale Makar already has that, so I think going into next year, it's just gonna change the thinking of a lot of voters going into next year.
I get what you're saying there, and like I completely agreed with it until I was thinking a little bit more. Nathan MacKinnon was chasing Taylor Hall for that Hart. And everybody knew who was the better of the two. And Nathan MacKinnon's never got that Hart.
No.
So, and like you can look back and be like, well, everybody clearly knows who was the better. That was Nathan MacKinnon's award. Like Taylor Hall, it was just given to him. Is this another way the Colorado Avalanche are going to get snubbed? And this is going to be the conversation next year when the Predators team is not going to look the same, and Cale Makar is going to be a member of a new look Avalanche next year, and he's doing a little bit more than he did last year. And everybody kind of points out like he was definitely the better of the two. I wonder if we're going to be having the same conversation next year when the Norris rolls around.
I don't know. I mean, I just feel like, well, as far as Nathan MacKinnon goes, I mean, I feel like he should have won it that year, obviously, but the following year, he was the hot pick to be the MVP in the Hart, and it didn't happen. It still hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So it's no guarantee. I'm not saying that it is, but I think we know what we have with Cale Makar, and I kind of just have this feeling that voters are watching this, and they're not saying if they voted for Roman Josi, they're not saying I got it wrong this year. I get if you want to vote for Roman Josi, but I just kind of feel like some of them that voted for them watched that series and were like, next year we probably have to give this kid his due, because I don't want to hear the junk about like he's 23 years old and he has all these years to win it. No, screw that. Like it's impressive what he's doing at his age, and reward him for it.
And I think the thing that really helps Cale's case is that he's doing this on the national stage.
Right.
And he's getting the attention of a lot more voters that probably didn't watch. Like Colorado games, you got to stay up late if you're on the East Coast. Nashville, you just turn it on. There they are. He looks good. Check my box. Yep. Next year, this name will stay in your mind, especially if Cale keeps up what he's doing.
Yeah.
So
I want to know what people think. Like, again, I'm not saying like just based on a playoff series is what's going to win so many award a year from now. But if you understand what I'm trying to get at here, does it make some sense? By the way, if nobody scores in the next 20 seconds, the Maple Leafs and Lightning are going to overtime.
The Leafs are gonna leaf, baby.
Yeah. So, and I did get a question on Instagram, and I wanted to bring this up quickly. Shane, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name, Bonfanti, says that he feels like he has cracked the code of the Skittle thrower, first of all. He was watching the video, and he feels like there was a kid in a knit cap. He tossed something directly at Cale, and Cale looks down to see what was thrown. He said this is at the 47.5 second left in the game mark. So not only, I mean, we should have known it was going to be a kid if it's Skittles being thrown.
Oh, my. The ever-loving nerve of that kid.
Right?
Bring me the child.
Maybe he just wanted Cale to sign his Skittle mid-game for whatever reason. I don't know.
Cale's not that good. I don't know if he could.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to sign.
But
it's already got an S on it, and he doesn't have a name. S in his name.
But he does ask a question and says, who would be a sleeper pick if the Avs go on to win the entire thing? You can't pick Cale Makar. You can't pick Nathan MacKinnon. Who would be kind of like that underground person that comes out of nowhere in the next few rounds to take the Conn Smythe award? So kind of like just a predicting a sleeper Avalanche player that could have a good next few rounds that could take that award.
It's got to be Val Nichushkin if you're not picking Nate or Cale. Like Nuke has already been putting in the work.
He is, but I mean, it's a lot of it's based on numbers. You know what I mean? They're not looking at play, and they're not looking at forechecking a lot for the Conn Smythe. So I think outside of, Cale Makar and Nathan MacKinnon, the obvious is Mikko Rantanen, who really hasn't gotten going too much. He was very quiet, I thought, in the first round. So it's always possible for him to kind of just blow up in the next few rounds and take that. Wouldn't be surprised for that. But somebody that's like not the household name that could take this thing, you always have to look at the goalie. You have to look at Darcy Kemper. You know what I mean? He could take that.
Left eye?
With T-Boz and chili. I think look at him. Kadri is always a possibility because he's had a great season. Below that, I don't think you're really going to get any of those bottom sixers that are coming out of nowhere to claim it. That would be unless there's like several game-winning goals by someone on the bottom six.
I have this feeling deep in my bones. The deeper these playoffs go, Val Nichushkin is going to steal the Avalanche a game.
Yeah, I could see him doing that.
With one of those scrappy games like the Western Conference Finals, like it's a 1-0 game, and it's going to be off on something Nuke did, and he got one of his Nuke goals, and that was it. Like I feel like he's on that track. Like he's already got, I think, 2 goals already. So
I think so. I think you're right. Yeah. So interesting question. So I'll throw that out to people out there in the chat as well. Who do you think? Kind of like a sleeper pick outside of the big guns. All right. So as we're on the topic of awards and all that, let's hear from Built Bar and then the 2 guys that continue to get snubbed in their categories. Is that going to happen again? But first, Built Bar, they have a brand new puff flavor. And Kyle and I always talk about how you have to go to their website and see. They always have brand new flavors coming out. They had those granola bars that they have released. And now they have a brand new birthday cake puff flavor. So they are coming in the mail for us so we can test these things. I will have to pass it on to my wife because I'm not the biggest marshmallow fan. But anything birthday cake, who doesn't want that?
That is made for me. Birthday cake, anything made for me.
Are you the spoon and birthday cake jar type of guy? Are you really?
Oh yeah, like I'm that kind of guy that'll eat birthday cake just the icing and like give
Yeah.
the cake part to my kids. Like
You're that guy.
I'm that
You've
guy.
never grown out of that, is what you're telling
Nope.
me. Yeah.
You're talking to a guy in a Scooby Doo shirt, Chris.
And of course, with Built Bars, even the birthday cake puffs, as sweet as they are, they have 150 calories, 16 grams of protein, and only 9 grams of sugar for this limited time flavor. It's an amazing option if you're looking for a healthy way to get the flavor and variety in on your day. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you will get 15% off of your order. And it doesn't matter what you order, including the birthday cake puffs. They don't remove those from the deal just because they're new. Once again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. I really am looking forward to seeing the nominees for General Manager of the Year, because this is one of life's greatest mysteries on why Joe Sakic continues to not even be nominated for this award. So you have this one, and Jared Bednar is another one who has yet to win Coach of the Year. And I just feel, I don't know, man. I feel like he's gonna not even be in the nominee, the top 3 nominees this year, and Joe Sakic absolutely should be. But just based on what's happened in the past 3 years, it's one of those things where it's like, I will believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
Do you think one of these guys, both of these guys, or neither of them make the final 3 nominees?
It has to be Joe Sakic's year this year, especially with how he handled the trade deadline alone and navigating the COVID shutdown and like how he constructed this team. It's got to be Joe Sakic.
I mean, you would have to, if he's not even in the nominees this year, I don't know what else this man needs to do to be part of the final 3. And for this year, I mean, if you want to say in the past years, maybe they put a lot of weight on the trade deadline because he's not been like, he makes trades, but they're not these holy crap. Like, these are massive deals. Maybe that's what voters want to see. And while this year wasn't like the enormous splash, it was, I would say, maybe the biggest splash that Joe Sakic has ever made in terms of the trade deadline. So everything that he did in the offseason leading up to this season that we're in, and the trade deadline, and getting Arturi Lehkonen and getting Manson, even if you want to throw Nico Sturman, like, he filled the holes that the Avalanche had, and you have to look at that. You have to look at that. Again, I don't know what the man would need to do if he doesn't get a nominee this year and win the thing.
And I hate to say this. I don't know if Bednar ever will.
Well, here's another one. Like, again, if he doesn't win it this year, and he's not going to be nominated this year, you see like these kind of like mock, almost like a power ranking, like we did yesterday with coaches, and they do it every so often throughout the year. Bednar's never been in the top 5 for ones that are done by the NHL Network. You always see Brendan Moore up there. Who else is always up there? Daryl Suter's always up there for what he's doing in Calgary. Andrew Burnett's in there. We were talking to Armando about that for the Florida Panthers. You feel like those 3 guys are going to be up there. And is it one of those things where Bednar doesn't get the notoriety because of the talent on his team? And you and I always argue, you still have to manage that talent.
Yeah. Like, especially if the Avalanche keep on going through this season and go all the way, get the cup. From this point forward, that's the Avalanche. I could coach the Avalanche to that. Bednar will never get credit another day in his life after they win the cup. That's out the window. So if it's not this year, with what Bednar also had to navigate with the COVID shutdown and the injuries, it's never happening.
And that is not talked about enough, what he does with this team that is just decimated. They've been healthy recently, to end the season. They've been healthy, and it wasn't just early this year. It's been multiple years now where this team has had injuries up and down the lineup, and not just your bottom six players or your third pairing or anything on defense. Like, you are out Gabe Landeskog, Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, Nathan McKinnon, Devon Taves, Nazem Kadri. You are out your superstars, and he has kept them afloat year after year. And it's kind of a shame that he's there's always coaches out there that are as deserving, but just the fact that he does not get nominated, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen.
It's the same reason you don't hear John Cooper's name every year.
It's a good point. Yeah, I'm thinking about that now. I mean, and for a team like that, you got back-to-back championships, and now you're obviously going for a third. That's not easy to do. Like, that's not easy to coach. There's so much pressure on a team like that, and he's got them. I don't know. They're in overtime right now. I don't think that's started yet, but
yeah. And then you get everyone who says, "Well, I could coach the Lightning to a Stanley Cup with that team." That's what Bednar is about to get for the rest of his coaching career.
1-0 St. Louis Blues with 1 minute and 45 seconds left in the first. So, yeah, there you go. And Edmonton is up 1-0 on the Kings 1.5 minutes into that game. So
I have never cheered so hard for the Kings in my entire life.
Long way to go in that one. So I don't anticipate Jared Bednar being up for one of the 3 final nominees. I absolutely do for Joe Sakic. And if it doesn't happen, I am going to start thinking that there's a conspiracy going on here. And
what does Joe know?
I don't normally. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I get a kick out of them. I think they're kind of fun. But I will be in full conspiracy theory mode if he's not even nominated in the top 3 for this year. We shall see. All right. But it's our last Friday before the Avs start playing again next week. So we've had a lot of time to catch up on whatever, movies, television shows. So let's hear from BetOnline. And then I finished Ozark earlier today. And you haven't watched it, but I want to get into... I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody that hasn't finished it yet. But ending was like, so-so. Good episode, but the ending... We'll get into it. But first, our partners over at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, all the fights, and even next season's NFL futures, which that schedule just dropped. And how about that, Bronco fans? Week #1, Seattle Seahawks, Denver Broncos. Nothing like that. Wow. I mean, I don't think...
What's the history there? I have no idea. What are you talking about?
There's no history whatsoever. But BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. That's betonline.net, where the game starts. So I did finish Ozark, and like I said, like the final episode, overall, it was a very good episode, but when a show that I'm so invested in like ends, I want that, like, the last scene of a show to really, like, just leave me like, wow. And while something like kind of big happened at the end of this episode, it wasn't kind of what I expected. And maybe it just had in my head what was going to happen, and that's never what happens. And I'm not basing it because it's like, oh, this is what I thought was going to happen, and it didn't go that way. I wasn't a fan of it. I just want to say it was a very good episode. A lot of the storylines were buttoned up, and you have kind of like a finality to certain characters. But it left me like, as soon as it was more like one of those Sopranos things where like it went dark, and I'm like, that was kind of weird. Okay. All right. But it got me like, I was fully anticipating it being high up there in like the best endings to any series, and it wasn't. But that doesn't take away from the whole show. Fantastic show. But it got me thinking, like, what are like my favorite endings to shows? And I have three that are going to be very difficult to beat. But do you have any that you remember, like, wow, like just left your jaw on the floor?
Well, yeah, and like the way how you said Ozark ended sounds like for me, my favorite television show of all time is Twin Peaks, and
Remember you talking about that?
the first two seasons were incredible, and they were back in the 90s. And then, of course, like because something was said in the show that 20 years later they'll see each other again. Season
Yep.
3 came out 20 years later, and of course, all the Twin Peaks fans get excited, and you think everything's going to wrap up, and it doesn't. We haven't seen season 4 or any hints of it, so we're all still.
Just kind of like in limbo here.
So it's
Wow.
I get that 100%, but when it comes down to like a good show that a good ending, my number one has to be Breaking Bad.
I Breaking Bad is probably my favorite show ever, ever. And I did like the ending. I thought
Yeah.
it was a very good ending, even though you knew what was going to happen because they keep talking about it since like season 2. You didn't
Yeah.
know how it was going to happen. So, yeah, it was
It's the
one of the best shows ever.
yeah, it made it feel complete, like you just witnessed a story.
Yeah, yeah.
So it really put a good bookend on an incredible show.
So for me, there's three shows that kind of stand out for endings. I was a huge Lost fan. I don't know if you were.
I was for like the first one or two seasons, and then
Yeah.
kind of
I mean, it gets weird. It gets really weird, but
it's J.J. Abrams. He ruined Alias
Yeah.
for me.
right, exactly. So, I just loved where that show went, like the twists and turns of it. And a lot of people didn't like the ending. I was fine with the ending. I thought the ending was very, very well
Interesting.
done. Yeah.
I know about the ending.
Yeah. So that's a great ending. The show Parenthood. You ever watch Parenthood?
Interesting. No.
Oh my God, man. Like, I don't care how manly anybody out there thinks they are. You will be a puddle while watching the show at several times throughout. I think there's like 5 or 6 seasons of it, maybe 7. But it's such a good show. And the ending is just perfect. It's just perfect for this show. It's so good.
Did you ever
Yeah.
take in the ending to Saint Elsewhere?
No.
It was a medical show like in the 80s.
Yeah, I've never seen an episode of that.
The last episode, it was probably the best ending of television of all time.
Mm-hmm.
The entire show, the episode ends and it pans into one of the doctor's like apartment, but like the kid is shaking a snow globe.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole show, all the seasons, everything that happened, the kid's holding a snow globe of the hospital. And the kid's dad is a janitor for the hospital, but in the show, he was like one of the big doctors. But in reality, he was just a janitor. And the kid had this whole thing, the whole show made up in his snow globe.
What?
Yeah.
That's like the Lego movie. Remember the
Yeah.
Lego movie? Like at the end, like Will Ferrell just comes walking down the steps, and it's reality, and it's his son
Yeah.
just playing with the Lego toys.
It was
Wow.
that's how Saint Elsewhere was. So very cool.
That just blew my mind. Wow, I might have to just go look up that. I'm sure it's on YouTube. Just the end.
It is. It's one of the all-time endings.
So for me, the ending to a series that I don't think will ever be beat was an HBO show called 6 Feet Under. I don't know if you've ever watched 6 Feet Under.
I have.
Oh my goodness! Like, I always heard that was one of the best endings. And I remember when the show came out, I watched the first episode of it, and I just never kept up with it. This was like around year 2000 or something like that, and I was in college and stuff, and I just didn't keep up with it. So a few years ago, my wife and I were looking for a new show to watch, and I'm like, I've always heard the ending of 6 Feet Under is good. Why don't we start it from the beginning? She's like, fine. The show itself is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
There's some parts where you're like, you don't like people. They're very hateable, but they do a very good job of like character development where you turn to start liking them as the seasons goes on. And I'm telling you, the ending is just it's chef's kiss. It's unbelievable. It still gives me the chills when I see the ending of that show.
My number 3, the ultimate King of the Hill, not the King of the Hill show. Great show, loved the show, but it's not King of the Hill.
Yeah,
Seinfeld, man.
that one was so polarizing. Oh my god.
They're in jail having the exact same conversation from the first episode.
Absolutely. Yep. And they even say, like, didn't we have this conversation before? But it was a good
the
way to bring
whole-
everybody back.
Exactly.
You know?
Like on trial for like the littlest thing, and everybody it was like a trial of character, and like the characters you fell in love with, it made you as a viewer feel bad for like enjoying it.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh yeah, these guys are actually pretty terrible.
And a lot of people were thinking, because they gave him a sentence. It wasn't just like, you guys are going to prison.
Yeah.
I think it was like 6 years or something like that. So a lot of people were thinking like, maybe in 6 years, they're going to like bring this show back. That never happened. And I'm glad it didn't, because shows like that, like, they don't wear out their welcome. And I think Jerry Seinfeld knew that. I think he's like, I'm going to get out of this while we're at the top, because we don't want to be on the downswing when people are going to forget us. And now it's one of the biggest shows in history.
And if you still want a show like that, like you could go get Curb Your Enthusiasm, and it's still got that same humor. So,
and if you want kind of like an immature version of that, Always Sunny.
Oh yeah,
Cannot be Always Sunny. So, I don't want that show to ever end, but when it does, I'm looking forward to that final episode, because that's going to be a good one. So we're all, I mean, you're never going to be all caught up on your shows, because there's 10,000 shows out there right now, but
I'm still watching Doctor Who.
yeah, well, that'll take you forever. But is there anything that everybody out there caught up on when you had these extra days off, thanks to the Avalanche sweep? Let us know in the comments. And if you agree with me on 6 Feet Under, just let me know how that affected you, because it's epic. So, all right, we'll be back on Monday. We will know who the Avs matchup will be by then. I'm just going to check the scores again really quick. I'm sure that Blues game is at intermission. It is. Maple Leafs and Lightning are still in overtime, so we're going to wrap this up so we can go watch that bad boy. And it's still 1-0 Edmonton. So until Monday, thank you for tuning in, making this your first listen of the day. Always appreciated. Definitely go check out Locked On NHL for your second listen. Get caught up on all these games right here and right now. And we will see everybody on Monday. He is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. I am Chris Maselli. And this is the Locked On Avalanche podcast. See you guys on Monday. Have a good weekend.